Good afternoon, everyone. Someone just confirm me that my voice is clear and streaming is fine. If everything is fine, just mention all set in comments. Good afternoon, Radha. If everything is fine, just mention all set. Okay, good to go, I guess. So welcome to this session. Today, we are going to take up live question and answers. Okay, all set. So some students have sent their questions. Okay, and let's start this discussion. So the major question which has been shared is how Chinese internal dynamics, or you can say Chinese political culture, is becoming an impediment over the strategic alignment of leading powers. To make you understand in a simpler way, we can say this, that recently when you saw G7 summit Britain, there was some comments made on Chinese rise and how it is threatening the global order. We also saw the comment of Italian PM. We are also observing the strategic engagement on the basis of, say, Quad. So all of these have one thing in common, and that commonness is that we have to uphold rule of law in international order, right? And China being a threat to that. Although some people say that's a Western discourse on China, that may not be the total, or you can say whole reality. Chinese economic rise, Chinese geopolitical rise is threatening the might of Western powers. This is an alternative discourse. But when question is saying how Chinese internal dynamics, and specifically we are mentioning how Chinese Communist Party is leading, and within the transition means when Xi Jinping became the General Secretary, we are talking about the transition which we discussed in the first session from 2012. What changes we observed in China's political system after Xi Jinping, and how, due to this conduct, this strategic alignment is having some hurdles. Okay. So as of now, this is the question. To make you understand this in a better way, you should know that Beijing is actually having some medium and long-term strategies, some objectives. And Western discourse in China represents that these medium and long-term strategies are going to be counterproductive for their own efforts, for their own interest. So if I ask, see, what are the medium and long-term strategic objectives of Beijing and where we can find them? So China says that PLA, PLA is an important component of their statecraft, an important pillar of their foreign policy. According to China, PLA is going to play a vital role in shaping the conditions of coming international order. Means international order is going to change and China is going to be in the center of this world stage. So China wants to be in the center stage. Now, some of you might think, what's the problem? Every nation aspires to become power. So what's the problem with China? Is it just insecurity of West, or there are some underlying stories? So let's discuss that. Number one, when China is saying that China is going to be the center of the world stage, it is not just that China is going to be leading these supply chains of the world economy. No, it is just you can say it is just a facet of what China is talking about, shift in international world order or international order. So how China is going to do that? Economy is one factor. Through economy, China wants to prove that whatever model China is implementing is the best. Post World War II, when USA actually propagated liberal international economic order and democracy as the solution to the problems of the world, now China's rise is a threat to that conception, threat to the hegemony of USA and the Western powers who actually work on these principles. Each step of China is towards that. Recent example I'm giving now. Look what happened during COVID, how China handled COVID. When the first case was found in the winters of 2019, not much was done by Chinese government at that time. And that is why this virus spread throughout the China. And when the people were on the street talking about failure of government, then what Chinese government did? Many provinces were actually totally, locked down. So the conception of lockdown, which many of you actually observed for the first time, most of the people observed for the first time, China actually strictly implemented that. China halted any kind of industrial activity at that time. So China was giving this message, it is possible in Chinese political system. It's not easy to do, to implement such hard measures in a democracy, in a Western democracy, because Western democracy has to be accountable, right? But same case is not with when China is under influence of one party. I told you how Chinese Communist Party is the leading party, and constitution itself says that other parties will be in consultation, but under Chinese Communist Party. So after these actions, China actually proved the world that numbers are reducing. We have controlled it. Then China was the one who got the first, you can say, V-shaped recovery during that time. So what do you think? What message China was giving? China was saying that new world order now has an alternative ideology to implement. And that alternative ideology or alternative way of running a country is Chinese model. China was proving that. Although, do you think whatever we saw in mainstream media is the only reality? Actually, that conduct of China was like self-congratulatory. Leaders of China saying the time and momentum is in our favor. This is a statement, this is a phrase which was used by Xi Jinping in his speech. Time and momentum are in our favor. And since they are in our favor, no one can stop China from rising. Right? So Chinese economic model, Chinese political model are being projected as an alternative to Western ideas. Right? Now, so now Western discourse on China says that actually Chinese model has deep faults. But these defaults do not come out easily due to the functioning of Chinese political system, because Chinese political system works on certain pillars. Number one pillar is controlling people. Controlling people. When I say controlling people, I mean policies which are intervening into the personal sphere of people. Then another is propaganda. So why I'm using the word propaganda as separate, some of you might think, oh, propaganda is also a tool to control people. Yes, you are right, but here I'm talking about Chinese people. But when I'm using it as a second way of controlling or actually Chinese policy, then propaganda also means what China is doing outside its territory. In the first session, I gave you example of magic weapon. Hope you remember. The department which is responsible for actually establishing links with Chinese diaspora across the world, building links with intellectuals, business groups, and so that they can actually work on the will of Chinese Communist Party, right? So propaganda, control on people, and subjugating of civil rights are some of the components of Chinese way of working. So Western discourse says that these are the ways, and these ways can never be considered as alternative to democracy or liberal international economic order. When I am using the word democracy, I mean Western democracy, not the Chinese conception of democracy, right? So Western discourse says that China is a benevolent power, a power which deliberately says that we have to do evil to these countries. So if China is a malevolent power, it itself means that some of the strategic engagements for prosperity, better linkage, are going to be hampered by the conduct of China, right? Because China wants its own vision on its own values in the rest of the world. That is what I explained to you. Its economic model, its political model, its values to be adopted across the world as a solution. So China is having brutish behavior at the home and at the abroad. Let me elaborate on this. Number one, if you actually observe some of the articles on international relations in past 6 months, you will see major articles are focusing on, major editorials are focusing on Indo-Pacific region, right? One important vision of Indo-Pacific is so that we can ensure rule-based order there, so that we can ensure other nations in the territory are not, they should not come under the influence of or under the lap of China. Because China, if China gets a hold in this region, then there will be discrimination and there will be negative implication on this important area for economic purpose, for political purpose, right? So it means we need to ensure Indo-Pacific region to be a vibrant region, our engagement ensure rule-based order, human rights being implemented. But why we are saying it is counter to China? The reason is, take example of Uyghur Muslims in Xinjiang region. One report says that in past 1 year, more than 1 lakh Muslims in that area are arrested, detained. And they are detained and they are sent to re-education centers. That's the term which Chinese Communist Party uses. If a particular area is not aligned with Chinese vision, Chinese values, that is what they are doing, subjugating their personal liberty, their basic rights. So we don't want this kind of example to become common if Chinese values are projected as the alternative to Western ideas. So that is what West is saying about China. Another example, Hong Kong, Taiwan. So China is doing there, bringing a separate act so that extending its power beyond what was the arrangement before in Hong Kong, subjugating press, expression, thereby similarly Taiwan. So some of the actions which are taken by China within their country actually tells the story of Chinese British behavior, right? And we have to actually put a counter. When I'm using the Western discourse in China, US says that China is engaged in genocide of Uyghur Muslims, and world community should take cognizance of this matter. That matter is not quite visible because Chinese media works under the propaganda arm of CCP. So it is like you can say paradox in itself that China is a member of P5 of UNESCO, which have the responsibility to intervene when a matter of genocide is there. But China itself is engaged in this, right? So now, China's trampling of its citizens' right, I gave you example of Xinjiang, Hong Kong, have undermined his argument. So what does this mean? Actually, when China is saying that Chinese model is the best model, but since China is mishandling its own region, I should not use the word own considering the special status given to Hong Kong, but China consider it, right? Autonomous region. So now the point is the Chinese national ambition are not actually being pursued in a benign manner. Itna easy nahi hai China ke liye, right? So to put forth their views at the dominant views is not quite easy for China considering the domestic crisis which China is handling. Now take a look over this report, US Defense Department report 2020. So this report specifically mentioned that CCP sees PLA as a practical instrument of PRC's foreign policy. I've explained this to you, right, in the first slide itself. So you can quote this report. So what actually CCP wants to do with this PLA, People's Liberation Army? They want to actually shape or revise international order. If they want to revise international order, China specifically has this objective. The new international order will give advantage to China. And this would be similar kind of advantage which we saw in post World War II order, which kind of advantage was given to USA, right? We know that US currency, US dollar is a reserve currency, most accepted currency. But as of now, China says that US is a declining power. US is in decline. Now there's a vacuum which is going to be created in world order. And every world order is, because I'm using the word world order, it means that it's not having any specific hierarchy like we have at national level. So China actually projects that it is not that China needs to become center of global order. It is world needs China to become center of world order. And the reason is decline of USA will create a vacuum. Since world order is anarchical in nature, there is no particular system, then it would actually create security issues. So at that point, China wants to show that China has financial, defense, technological, and value-based strength to actually take the space which was once taken by USA. That is the broader vision of China. And that is the meaning of this word, that they want to revise international order. I hope you got this point. Why China is saying it is not that we need to be at the center stage of the world order. It is world needs us to be at the center stage, because in an anarchical order, everyone wants some power to ensure that rule-based order is there. Yes, that is what China is saying. Although China is itself a hurdle in rule-based order. There are various examples to this. What China is doing in South China Sea, what China is doing with this territorial disputes, showing assertiveness on this Diageo Island issue with Japan, partly parasol in South China Sea and this Ladakh or Arunachal region. We are observing this, right? But this is the nature of international politics. You create a discourse. Sometimes the discourse which you are projecting maybe having some contradiction. Means what you are projecting, that when China is going to be at the center stage, because US is in the decline, we are going to ensure rule-based order. We are going to bring prosperity because we are example of prosperity. We have proved our track record. That is why world needs us. And what you are observing by this OBOR is one fragment of this revising international order strategy. I hope you got this point. This is very much necessary, right? Now let's look what China is seeing now, how China is relating to this strategic engagement among leading powers, right? China is saying that we are at consensus. We are clear with this. Yes, US hegemony is on decline. Plus, we are also clear with this fact, because since US already knows that if any power can replace US hegemony, it is China, then it is quite clear that our relations will remain rocky. It is quite clear. It's a fundamental fact. अरे जब replace US को कर रहे हैं, तो US क्या खुश होकर अपनी पोजीशन दे देगा? US will fight at the last moment. And this is what US is doing as of now. Look what Donald Trump was saying against China, and look what Biden is saying against China in G7. Right? So China is quite clear कि ये तो होना ही है. Right? बिना संघर्ष के फर्स्ट पोजीशन मिलेगी कैसे? That is quite clear. Right? So what kind of strategy China is observing now? Is China ready to confront every leading power? No. इतना बेवकूफ नहीं है China. China says US hegemony is already in decline and relations are going to be remain rocky. So even if we confront, this confrontation will not actually make US dismissive or become, having a cordial relation, considering the strength of China. No. Strength भी वहां दिखाई जाती है. You have to show the strength where you know that other party at one point will accept that you are the bigger part, and that is how they will come on the dialogue. But this is not going to be the case with US, because US is in decline. Okay. I made one video that is on this Edukemy YouTube channel, which is talking about China is the second largest economy and China is aspiring to be the first largest economy. And in that video, I'm talking about what generally happens when a country becomes second largest, but there are some hurdles. How in history there were many nations who reached that second stage aspiring to become first, but they could not achieve the first position. So in that video, I shared two reasons and I want to connect them with this dimension. One reason which I shared in that video was economic crisis. Generally, what happened in history, when a nation becomes the second largest economy, it ran into economic crisis and then final decline. Okay. Second is political crisis. Some nations ran into political crisis. For economic crisis, in that video, I gave example or case study of Japan. And for political crisis, how from political crisis, I gave example of Germany. Germany was the second largest economy and working fine. But when it ran into these political crises, excessive militarism being used as a component of statecraft, we saw decline of Germany. So there was political crisis in Germany, which led to its decline from the second position. There were economic crisis in Japan, which led to its decline from the second position. Right? Now, what's the story of China? What is going to happen with China? So, if I analyze what is happening in past 2 years, many scholars were saying, oh, now is the time of economic crisis. Economic crises are visible. Now there will be a downturn. But look what China did. China bounced back. Other scholars were saying China is going to run into political crisis. In this Foreign Affairs magazine, there was an article. In that article, a specific point was saying when a party comes under one-person rule, like we have observed in China as it transitioned from Hu Jintao to Xi Jinping. So Xi Jinping is actually leading the party and the nation as one-man rule. So history says that this actually is an indicator of decline of that party and that political system. So by this article, I was connected, by this actually analysis, I was connecting to what happened with Germany. Militarism as a matter of statecraft, I already told you. Excessive use, showing assertiveness. Right? In the article saying since Xi Jinping has took the charge, that deliberation consultation element has gone and it will lead to decline. So political crises are also regarded as one reason that could lead to decline of China. But I have a different analysis on this. The reason is in 2018, we saw National People Congress, the legislative body. So there is National Party Congress, that is different in China, and there is National People Congress. Okay, so when I use National People Congress, NPC, it means I'm talking about the highest legislative body of Chinese political system. Okay, when I'm using the word National Party Congress, then I'm talking about the highest body in terms of consultation of Chinese Communist Party, CCP. Okay, at one point there's a party, at other point there's government. Okay, so they have amended their constitution, People Congress, National People Congress, and they have actually removed this limit of that Xi Jinping has to resign after this, or tenure going to complete. So it shows that Xi Jinping is actually gathering the required support, that he is going to remain the Chinese president for a longer period. And the vision of China becoming the center stage is going to vibrate for a longer period. So as of now, we are not observing political crisis, okay? Because what Xi Jinping is doing, Xi Jinping is having an antidote of political crisis. Political crises are there, but he is having an antidote. Can anyone pinpoint in comments what is the antidote which Xi Jinping is having? I'm looking into your comments. And in the previous session, I have given that reference of that antidote, but you have to just build the connection. Come on. Just use your logic. If people are not supporting Chinese Communist Party, I mean, if people start questioning Chinese Communist Party, people start questioning Xi Jinping government, people actually start questioning that actually this government is weak. So that's a political crisis. What is the antidote to that? Come on. The antidote is hyper nationalism. And this is what Xi Jinping is using. I told you in the previous session. Hyper nationalism Xi Jinping is using. Look his speeches, what he's saying. China is not going to get bullied by anyone now. Time and momentum is in Chinese favor. So when he's saying China is not going to get bullied, so it's touching the emotions of the people, giving them historical examples how Chinese people were abused by Japan, Western powers. So no matter how failure a government is, how much civil rights that government subjugate, now people will stand together. Nahi, yehi hai. This is the person who is going to give us our strength back. Now they will want this president to continue. So hyper nationalism is an antidote which Xi Jinping is using. So how he is actually ensuring that antidote is used? When we are having skirmishes on Ladakh, do you think they are being interpreted in Chinese media like they're interpreted in Indian media? No. In Chinese media, they're like, this India is having border infrastructure so that it can bring instability in our region. India wants to actually take away some of our land. Then Xi Jinping would ask, are you ready for that? People would say, no, not any cost. So that's how things are done. You create an issue and then you interpret issue in a different way, and then you consolidate your base and you actually resolve the political crisis, domestic political crisis. So it appears that China is pursuing a three-pronged strategy. Okay, what are the three-pronged strategies? Just listen to me. One is China wants to maintain a non-hostile external environment. Now, some of you might question, non-hostile external environment? China is pursuing this policy? But if we look at the past incident, it seems like China is doing everything to create hostile environment. Look what China is doing in South China Sea and this Galwan Valley and this East China Sea. So it means China is creating hostile environment. How can China is following this particular strategy? How many of you are having this question in mind? Come on. Those who are having this question in mind, just mention yes. Those who know the reason, just mention no. I'm looking at your comments. Come on. Meanwhile, you can also share this video in your groups so that other aspirants can also join in and they can also put forth some intelligent questions. Yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, come on. Yes, yes. Okay. You are having this question now. Now listen to me. Why I'm saying that? If you look up, if you take a look of strategic engagement which US is actually having with other Western powers so that they can counter China. In spite of that, China is not having a counter behavior in his approach towards European powers. Example, China in this US-China trade war could have done more because China is having the largest foreign exchange reserve. China could actually destabilize the US dollar. Indication was given, but action in this regard was not taken. China could have gone full blown, but China did not do that. What the reason? Because China knows that US hegemony is itself on decline, number one. China knows US has strong partners in West, European countries, and China wants a non-hostile environment with them. The reason is China wants to penetrate into these markets. Take a look over One Belt, One Road initiative. China wants to connect Asia, Middle East, Europe. China wants to lead this market. China wants to lead these trade routes. Do you think these trade routes would be feasible if China is having hostile environment? No. Now, when it comes to the neighbor, then why China is having hostile environment on the neighborhood? I've already told you, antidote, political consolidation, hyper-nationalism. So that is why China is balancing between the two. At one point, China is having a balanced and patient tactic even with those powers who are going full-blown against China in many international forums. Those who got this point mention yes. So yes, you have already mentioned in previous question, mention YAY. So this is Washington's encirclement strategy. This is what I have explained you in a simple manner. Washington is having allies in West, this Europe. And these nations are of strategic importance for China. That is why China wants to counter this Washington encircle strategy by having a non-hostile stance with these nations, no matter what they say against China. If some of you have analyzed the G7 summit, then you will observe the difference between the comments made by Biden and Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson was not clearly, so outspokenly against China like Biden was. You know why? Because China's this strategy wasn't work. Same is the case when you take a look how Germany is having a strategic outreach with China, and how China is having interest in EU, European Union, and actually communicating this very much clearly that within EU, these nations should have more say in deciding with whom they want to engage. So those who got this, mention YAY in comments. Come on. I hope it is very much clear. Great. Second, reducing dependence on America. That is what China is doing. Now, what is China doing under this second point of strategy? Point is this. So, general idea which a student may have, if China is building routes through this OBOR, if China is strengthening its interest or connections in other Western countries, then it means it's a step for reducing dependence on America. Yes, you are correct. But there are other markets as well. If you are talking about external solution, then there are other markets as well. Look, China's outreach in Latin America, look, China's outreach in Africa, right? But there is internal change also. In some of the recent speeches, Xi Jinping has made it clear. Now is the time that China's economy has to become more consumerist. And he says that we need a dual circlement of economy. Till now, Chinese strength or China's economic power was majorly dependent on exports. Only a fraction was on the consumption. Means if industries are there, how industries are going to survive? They want to sell their products. You can sell your products outside, it means you can export, and you can also sell your products within the economy. But when it comes to the reality of Chinese economy, people there were not having, that potential was not actually utilized fully. So now China is saying, as of now, with a previous strategy, we have actually achieved that we have released more than 800 million people from the clutches of poverty. Now we are engaging them into various industries. Now their disposable income are increasing. It means now our industries are going to utilize our own markets as well. Okay, so that's how they are reducing the dependence on America. Next, expanding the reach of Chinese influence overseas. So how China is influencing overseas? There are some ways. For example, I hope you have heard about it, checkbook diplomacy. Especially when it comes to developing nations, how China is extending its outreach. China analyzed there are some think tanks which are working deliberately on various nations. I mean, think tanks specifically working on Sri Lanka, need of Sri Lanka. Then they would recommend to Chinese regime that Sri Lanka is in critical need of these projects, but Sri Lankan government is not having adequate funds. Now China will enter. Oh, you have this need and we are a friend, so we are going to support you, right? So extending reach through infrastructure projects, this checkbook diplomacy, giving them loans. Another is, if you take a look what China did in COVID times, China has supplied more than 300 million vaccines to counter the narrative of this, that COVID is a basically China created problem. China wanted to project that if COVID had anything to do with us having some advantage, then why would we actually create vaccines and give it to the world? More than 300 million vaccines. But the truth here is only 25 million vaccines out of the 300 million were donations. Other vaccines were commercial transactions, means China actually sold them and gained from them. And when it comes to efficacy, if you compare the efficacy, the vaccines which are created in West, means USA and other European countries, they are far better what China provided. That is what some reports are saying. Now, through this discussion, I hope you are clear with this point. To understand this particular subtopic or an important topic, we need to have a clear understanding of domestic imperatives, means what is going on in China. Because if we understand the domestic crisis which are happening in China, then we will be able to actually guess what could be the China's policy now. If political crises are there, then Chinese government is bound to use hyper nationalism. It means at that time, our forces should be in the ready position, because anything can happen. Because China is having domestic crisis. That's how things are linked. If China is having economic crisis, it means now we are having some negotiating power because we are providing China a ready market, right? So we saw when it comes to domestic crisis, we saw anti-poverty movements, anti-pollution campaigns, anti-corruption campaigns which were going on in China. And these campaigns are not just political crisis for the government. These campaigns are actually detrimental for the longer vision of China. The Chinese model is the alternative model to the Western model, and Chinese model means way of government, way of economy, and their value system to be the best. How can their value system be the best if they are having these kind of crises within their territory? So it means it actually shifts the public perception over the performance, right? So now take a look over some excerpts from this book, End of Era. So Paul Minzer says that leadership is consumed by the needs to strengthen. Means he says that Xi Jinping has consolidated the power. He has not consolidated the power due to some personal gain, that he wants to become the the whole single leader who is actually having seen all the matters. No, it is more than that. One, I told you in the previous session, Mao's idea, that Mao was saying that party in the government, party leading in the government, in the this army, left, east, east, west, north, south, top, har jagah the leadership should be of the party. That was Mao's idea. There is one reason. Another reason is he says that actually there are some levies on which a particular establishment work. Means you need certain support basis. You need media. Media can be controlled. You need private corporations. You need support of intellectuals. You also need to ensure the undercurrents which are going on in the nation, right? So these are the levies on which establishment actually ensure that things are working fine. So he says that the levies, they rely on to keep the waters of turbulent society in check, and we have to ensure that these levies should be in our control. Otherwise we will not be able to ensure the turbulence which comes in a society, because turbulence comes in every society. Okay, so he says that as of now, it seems that leadership of Chinese Communist Party is too consumed to strengthen its position. It says that actually challenges are there. You can take a look for the title, how China's authoritarian revival is undermining its rise. It means at one point China is becoming authoritarian. In the previous session also I mentioned this to you, that in boards of many corporations in China, Chinese Communist Party representatives are there. So it shows authoritarian rule. But why they're having this rule? Because they want, the leadership thinks this is the way to strengthen their position. But according to Paul Minzer, they are actually undermining their own rise due to this. Because perception matters a lot when you are saying that Chinese model is the alternative model. Who is going to accept Chinese model as the ultimate model when authoritarian ways of conduct are being utilized by government? Those who agree with this point, just mention agree. Those who disagree, just mention disagree. Because we believe in dialect. So you can quote in your answer Paul Minzer. So now, given it's up in the end, it is quite clear that at China's economic strength is expanding. That is quite clear. right? And we also know strategic weight of China is also increasing. I gave you example how China is having strategic engagement with many EU members who are allies of US, but not that much vocal against China's conduct. So it shows strategic weight of China, right? China's actions now directly impact the lives of United States and around the world. So that is the importance of how Chinese Communist Party is running China, because their actions are going to impact the life of USA and also around the world. So at this point, I declare this short session complete, and I hope this session actually added value in your orientation, understanding of these contemporary issues. Many times what happens when some things are written in an article, people are generally, aspirants are not able to contemplate, right? And sometimes one particular editorial is not sufficient to give you the whole perspective. That is why I've started this initiative. If you liked it, you can share among your peers so that we can make this whole process more enriching. Okay. See you in the next session with a new topic, and you will enjoy the topic, and the topic is quite important, and the topic is going to be from paper 1 section B, means IGP, Indian government and politics. Take care, keep learning, keep growing. If you find any doubt, you can shoot me a comment, and I'll be more than happy to help you out.